I'm Russ Lowenthal. I have the honor of being Director for Database Security Product Management. That means that at Oracle, I'm part of the team that does encryption, access control. I heard someone talking about auditing just a second ago, and recursive calls, overloading the audit trail. We're the guys who develop that piece of the Oracle database. So today's call, or this particular hour's call, is to focus on things like transparent data encryption, auditing, user management, really anything to do with database security. I am not part of the Linux security team or identity management. Security at Oracle covers a broad range. This is specific to database. Shouldn't be talking about anything new. As many of you know, 18C was just released, so new products are quite a ways out for us now. But if I talk about anything that's coming in a future version, do keep in mind that until we release it, we're never sure it's actually going to get out the door. From a database security standpoint, there's a couple of announcements just wanted to make. One of those is if you're thinking about submitting a session for Open World this year, the call for speakers is now open. We're especially interested in people using Audit Vault in interesting ways. Same thing with Database Vault. So if you were thinking about submitting a session on either one of those topics, please loop me in and I'll see what I can do for you. Database 18C was just released this month. As many of you know, we've got it out in the cloud already. It's also available on premises for Exadata. There's a lot of interesting new features in 18C, most especially the new centrally managed user feature. Key Vault is currently at Bundle Patch 6. Bundle Patch 6 adds some nice capability in around the way that high availability works with Key Vault. If any of you are using Key Vault and haven't yet installed Bundle Patch 6, take a look at some of the new features. I think you may find those useful for you. And Bundle Patch 7 is the current one for Audit Vault and Database Firewall. Bundle Patch 7 adds in some new reports around GDPR. It also adds in some performance improvements, and it builds on the work we did in Bundle Patch 6, especially around collecting before and after values. Okay. So that's kind of what's new in the database security world. Taking a step back, as we look at securing an Oracle database, we normally divide our controls up into 4 different areas. Probably the first one most people look at is you want to evaluate what your current state is, and we have a couple of things that we give you to help do that. You want to look at ways to prevent things you don't want to happen from happening, preventive controls, detect when someone's doing something wrong. And then we have a special class of controls called data-driven security. Evaluate, prevent, detect, those are very common in the security world. They're not unique to database security. Data-driven security tends to be somewhat database-centric. It's where you might have the contents of the data drive the security around that data. From a evaluate standpoint, there's really 3 primary things that we look at. One of those is within Enterprise Manager. There is a module for sensitive data discovery, and sensitive data discovery is obviously a good part of securing a database. You have to know what sensitive data you have and where it resides before you can decide what to do with it. No significant changes in the last year or so on sensitive data discovery. If you're on Enterprise Manager 13.1 or 13.2, you'll have this available to you. If you're in Database 12C or higher, Database Vault has a module built in for role and privilege analysis. The idea is to see what privileges a user is actually using and then revoke privileges that they may have granted that they're not using. The goal for this is to try and reduce the chance that if someone captures an account, steals credentials for it, that they can't get in and use maybe privileges that the user doesn't even know they have to do bad things. So it cuts down on the attack surface. And then the third evaluate control is the database security assessment tool. This is our latest product release. We released version 2.01 of DBSAT just last month. You may have seen blog postings or press releases on this. There's a lot of new things in this version of the database security assessment tool. We've built in a sort of a quick runtime of sensitive data discovery. Doesn't go as in-depth as what Enterprise Manager does, but there's also no requirement for Enterprise Manager when you run DBSAT. So if you don't use EM, that may be helpful too. We've also included CIS benchmark and GDPR findings as part of the DBSAT output. Just kind of continuing the catalog of things that we might talk about today. From a preventive standpoint, we do a lot of things within the database. We've got everything from encryption to strong authentication to database vault, key vault for storing keys, and of course data masking and subsetting. From a detection, we mostly focus on database audit and then supporting that with Audit Vault and database firewall. And from a data-driven standpoint, what we generally look at is virtual private database and kind of the next generation of virtual private database if you're in 12.2, which would be real application security. We look at label security as a data-driven control, and to some degree you might consider data redaction, although we usually put that in the preventive controls. So that's kind of it from a control standpoint. If you break those out in a little bit more detail, there's a lot of things that you can look at. And I guess at this point, the floor is open to any questions.
In the Audit Vault, there's a piece of it that does stored procedure auditing. What exactly is that?
So part of what Audit Vault will do is it will take signatures of a stored procedure, and we basically look at the text behind the stored procedure and we generate a hash of that text, and we will tell you if a procedure has changed. The design goal for that is if you look at attack patterns against a database, someone might try and get in and replace a stored procedure with another stored procedure that does something you hadn't intended it to do. That stored procedure monitoring function within Audit Vault will make that very, very visible that someone has changed a stored procedure.
Okay, that makes sense.
Good question. Are you using Audit Vault?
I am in the process of going through all the corporate headaches on paperwork, but I do have it set up in development right now and just starting to play with it. That one has been giving me an error message back. The pieces have been working fine.
So do reach out to me if you have trouble getting that working, and we can take a look at that. For Audit Vault, and if anyone's got a question, please either break in on chat or audio, but rather than just have dead air, this is one of my favorite topics. Have you taken a look at the reporting capabilities within Audit Vault yet?
No, not really. I just got it set up on, I think I got it on 4 boxes right now.
Oh, good deal.
Start monitoring. Little headache with the 11.2s because they had old Javas. So
getting the agent to install can be challenging sometimes if you've got the old Java versions out there.
Yeah, that's been fun.
Yeah. Are you using just agent collection, or are you using network-based audit collection as well?
Just right now, I just did the agent. The next step would be probably trying to get the sys audit or whatever else part on the host pulled back in.
Okay.
And my next also step would be to look at deploying the agent on a SQL Server.
I think you're really gonna like what it does on SQL Server. I hate to say this on an Oracle call, but I actually think Audit Vault works better on SQL Server than it does on Oracle.
Yeah.
Really, really good monitoring. For SQL Server, are you going to be using Event Log or Native Audit?
Got no clue yet. I just know got some issues over there with our current process. So I want to get this installed over there and brought in.
Okay. Well, you'll find it works with both Native Audit and Event Log. I generally tend to try and go with Event Log just because that's non-mutable. There's no chance someone can go in and tamper with it. But however you're auditing your SQL Server, we should be able to work with.
Okay. Yeah, this is Jim. I'm down the street from you. You've been here, so you know who I am.
Oh, I've moved. I'm in Florida now.
Oh, okay. That's a long
Sorry.
road.
Yeah. Long time no see.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm getting both the Audit Vault and Key Vault stood up.
Oh, good deal.
I got the Key Vault for 11. That's pretty simple to talk to them. 12, I've gotten about halfway through that.
Yeah, the only gotcha on 12 is that change in the syntax. I think we all kind of got used to the syntax in 10 and 11, and then this whole new administer key management is different. But once you sort of switch your brain to this new methodology, it does get easier.
Okay, good. Yeah, I got about halfway through, and it's like I keep getting to the point of wallet's there but not opened or something. I forget. It's been a couple months since I've been on that.
I can't remember. Did I send you the TDE survival guide when I was out there last time?
I can't recall.
Let me see if I've still got your email. If I do, I'll get it out to you. It's
okay.
If you're doing Key Vault, it's definitely worth having.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, the Audit Vault, the GUI's pretty on it.
Our GUI could be prettier. One of the things I love about our Audit Vault is it's not as cluttered as some of the other tools out there. But it's very functional. Are you doing production or just?
Right now, it's just on a couple of development. It will get moved hopefully in the next month or two to production. But yeah, I was the one asking about the recursive auditing with SysDBA earlier.
Oh, yeah, that definitely can get you.
I got good at creating policies with the where clauses in it.
Oh, so you're using Unified Audit?
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Yeah, I think that was one of the best things we've done in a long time. Are you on 12.1 or 12.2 for the Unified Audit?
We've got 12.1 in our environment in production. We're at the end step. Hopefully, by the end of the month, we're supposed to release 12.2, and that's what I've been working on for the last 3 months.
We're working on a performance patch for 12.1 that just about doubles the throughput for audit. So give me, we're probably got about another 2 or 3 weeks before we have this thing ready to go, and then, maybe let a couple other people play with it first. But just if you think about it, check with me back in about a month, and we should have this patch ready to go. I'm not sure if you have any performance issues or not, but, never hurts to.
Yeah, it's more trying to audit what we want, but getting too filled up.
Yeah. Well, that's the benefit of Unified Audit is that you get the conditional auditing. That's why it was such a nice change over traditional audit.
Yeah, the biggest problem we had in 12.1, or at least how I had one of these wins configured, it worked great until you rebooted. You'd have to relink, turning Unified Audit off, fix the policy, and turn it back on. Yeah, 12.2, I've been, at least from the ones I've created, I haven't been able to kill anything.
Well, we learned a lot of lessons in 12.1, so we did some pretty significant re-engineering in 12.2 with what we learned in 12.1, and so now we're kind of going back and fixing what we can in 12.1 to come close to the 12.2 performance. There's no way we can match it, but we'll come close to it.
Yeah, one of the things I found is mainly all these got this context in there. Where the service name is background, don't audit that stuff. Take the first part of your program name with the OR agent .bin. Get rid of those. That definitely helps scale down what's getting audited.
Yeah. Well, is anybody playing with the new centrally managed user feature yet? The 18C directory integration capability?
Can you explain what that is?
Sure. You know what enterprise user security is? Where you take database users and identify them globally in an LDAP directory?
Oh yeah, we've got an effort with that.
So we've had that feature out since, I think since Oracle 8.1, either 8.0 or 8.1 is when we first introduced that. But it's always required an Oracle directory, so Internet Directory or Unified Directory or one of those. In 18C, we allowed direct connection of the database to Active Directory without requiring an Oracle directory in the middle. And we call that feature centrally managed users. Kind of an interesting capability. It's been the #1 requested feature for our customer advisory board for the last 3 years running. So we're glad to finally get it out the door.
In that guide, does it state all the commands you need to set it up with the Key Vault in 12?
It does.
Okay, good.
Now, what it doesn't cover in that guide for Key Vault is some of the HA stuff. That's changing fairly rapidly, especially in this latest bundle patch 6. So for that, you want to kind of refer to the manual and the MOS notes. But the general how to get it working in a POC or something, that's there in the guide.
Okay.
Could you say more about the row level security?
Sure. Row level security is just what it sounds like. It's filtering individual rows so that some users see some rows, other users see different rows when they go against a table. You might do this from a classification standpoint. Maybe you have internal records and secret records mixed in the same table. You might do it from a multi-tenant standpoint. Maybe you have customer A and customer B sharing the same table, but customer A can't see customer B's records. From a mechanical standpoint, there's a couple of ways to implement row-level security within Oracle. There is virtual private database, which has been around for a very long time. And what virtual private database does is it allows you to write a little PL SQL function that generates a where clause that will automatically be applied to the table. So it filters what you see by applying this where clause. And you might say, if your customer name is X, or if you're coming from IP address range Y, it doesn't matter what that is, then show this data or use this where clause. Label security is a second way to do row level security. So labels is arbitrary. I might say that this row belongs to the customer A compartment and this other row belongs to the customer B compartment. And unless somebody belongs to the compartment for customer A or customer B, they don't get to see those labels or those rows. And the third way to do row level security, and the newest, is something called real application security. We introduced this in 12, and it's kind of the next generation for virtual private database. And what it allows you to do is multi-level security at both the row and column level, where you can have different policies that are enforced. And the idea is to push the security that would normally be done in an application down to the database. But it all boils back down, whichever mechanism you use, it all comes back to that same basic concept of, I've got a table, it's got 1 billion rows in it, but Johnny should only see 5 of those billion rows. So when Johnny says select star, Johnny only gets 5 rows back. When Mary logs in, she's supposed to see 50 of those rows. She says select star, she gets 50 rows back, and so on and so on.
Yeah, that's the part I was looking at, because right now we're defining row level security in OBIEE, because that was the easiest place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to bring it back to the database, and the same with Apex applications hitting similar tables.
So one of the great things about OBIEE is it populates the actual user who's selecting back to the database through client identifier. So it's very easy to design either label security rules or VPD rules or real application rules, any of those. No, not real application. Actually, real application wouldn't be a good choice for OBIEE, but either label security or VPD would. When you say OBIEE, are you using the on-premise version or the cloud analytics?
On-premise.
On-premises?
Yeah, we're in the middle of a migration from 11 to 12. So once it's actually in 12, some of these things that we did not address in 11, I want to address with 12. But it's all running against Exadata that's running 12.1.
Nice. Plans to go to 18C?
Maybe. It's one of those where can we convince enough people, but it's the life cycle of 18C. And so
18C is going to be a short life cycle.
I know. And so everybody's thinking, why bother going through all the work? Wait a little bit longer and then go one further.
So wait for 20 to come out. I think 20 is our next long-term release.
Yeah, we're short on personnel, and so trying to do every single one is difficult.
Nope, completely understand.
So
now, as long as it's still getting its security patches and there's not a feature you need, then there's no point in migrating.
There's a couple of features I would like, but none that I can't live without. And Oracle's actually doing our patching. So with our maintenance cycles, that's all fine.
Oh, good deal. Yeah, I'm excited about the new autonomous stuff coming online this year.
It would be fun to play with.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to play with, but I think patching for most people, especially people who aren't on Exadata with the Platinum services, like I'm guessing you are, patching is probably one of the hardest things we have to deal with. And to have that just happen in the background and not have to pay attention to it, that's going to be worthwhile.
Hello, my name is Jorge. I want to ask you if all of these features are part of the advanced security license.
Ooh, that's a good one. From a feature standpoint, advanced security includes transparent data encryption, data redaction, export encryption through data pump, RMAN encryption. It includes encrypted secure file lobs. And what is the one I'm missing? We hit redaction, TDE, RMAN, encrypted secure file lobs, data pump. Oh, and a database file system, encrypted table spaces. So that's what advanced security does. The controls listed here, this kind of runs the gamut. It's everything from advanced security through database vault, through data masking and subsetting, key vault. That's all included here. Was there a specific feature you were looking for? Then I could tell you what it belongs to in terms of licensing.
Yeah, what about label security and real application security?
So real application security is part of the core database. So as long as you have Enterprise Edition, you have real application security. Label security is an extra cost option.
But it's not part of the advanced security license.
No, advanced security is mostly encryption.
Okay.
The only real access control mechanism built into advanced security is data redaction.
database auditing have a different license too?
Database auditing is part of the core database. There's no extra charge to use it. Audit Vault is a product that you would buy to scrape the audit trail off of the database and then do analysis and reporting on it. But for database auditing, that's part of your core database license.
Including the Unified Audit Trail.
Unified Audit Trail is part of the core database license, no additional cost.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. If you ever have questions like that around licensing, if you go to docs.oracle.com, go into the database documentation, and let's just go to the Oracle database, and inside of the Oracle database, if we go to the bookshelf and we look for license, inside the licensing manual is really feature by feature what versions of the database it belongs to, and if it's something that is an extra cost, for example, transparent database encryption, it'll tell you that that belongs to Oracle Advanced Security. So a lot of people aren't familiar with the licensing guide, or you kind of skip over it and you think that it's nothing really worthwhile. But if you do have a question about what's included where or which edition you need to be in, it's a great reference.
With the Audit Vault set up, does it set the timestamp for the purge to come through and clear the audits out?
So Audit Vault does not do that automatically. Well, I can rephrase that. The audit agent does set the timestamp so that the audit purge knows when it can purge to, but Audit Vault won't configure that purge. So it'll set you up to where you're ready to do it, but then you have to do the extra step of configuring the purge yourself.
Right.
Patrick asked a question on DBSat. What DBSat will do is it goes through and analyzes the database, not in terms of CVEs, but mostly in terms of configuration. Let me see here. I'm just going to bring up a quick DBSat output so you guys can see it. All right, and let's do share. All right, so hopefully what you're seeing now is the Oracle Database Security Risk Assessment output. It should just be a Chrome browser tab. This is what DBSat will look like, is it'll spit something out. It'll say when it did its assessment, what database it did the assessment on, and then what it found. So in this case, for example, it found we're on a 12C database, found these options are in use, and it sees, for example, you're missing a patch. It shows you what users are in the database and says, oh, by the way, I notice you have 4 people who are assigned to use the system table space as their default table space. You really shouldn't do that. Or you've got sample schemas that are unlocked. You should get rid of those or consider not using them. Or you've got inactive users sitting around. So this is really a way to go out and do a quick check of the things that you would probably look for if someone said, hey, go assess this database and find out where we could improve stuff from a security standpoint. You've got an expired user who's been expired for a long time. You've got default passwords out there. That's always something you want to change. And I had mentioned that in the latest version of DBSat, the one that we just released last month, we now include references to the CIS benchmarks. So here's an example of that. We'll also include references to GDPR. Let me see if I can find a GDPR finding. There's one. Let's see. There's a couple of GDPR findings in here, but none of them are especially interesting. This database didn't have a lot of privacy type data in there. But this is what DBSAT's output will look like. I'd also mentioned that starting with the newest version of DBSAT, there's a new module that does sensitive data reporting. This is the sensitive data assessment report. So you'll now get 2 reports from from DBSAT instead of just 1. And the sensitive data module will tell you what tables it found sensitive data in, or data that might be sensitive, because you always get false positive with sensitive data discovery. It'll tell you what columns it thought might be sensitive and where that fits into and how many rows it found in there. And it'll go down to each individual column, tell you what the column name is, what the column comment is, if there's a column comment there, and specifically what type of data it found. So Patrick, does that answer the question? It's not going to give you CVEs. For the most part, CVEs, if it's a public CVE, then the answer is patch, because the CVEs don't become public until the vendor has developed a patch for them. So if you run something like a Qualys or something like that, and it tells you you've got 10,000 open CVEs, there's one answer to that. Apply the latest security patch and those go away. Patrick, did I answer your question, or? Nope, not really answering the question. Okay, I'm not understanding the question, sorry. Does it do security? Oh, you're asking if it only does inside the database, or does it look at other things too? It does look at other things too. It'll look at your listener. Let's see. For example, here we're looking at, no, that's just still just parameters. Here we've got XProc, for example, set up. So it's saying, take a look at XProc. You aren't encrypting in this case, so it will look at listener. It will look for TNS poisoning, yes, so it'll check to make sure whether or not you've got TNS poison solved. That's it? Cool. It does some primitive checks against the operating system. They're very primitive, mostly around things like file system. Let's see. So we'll look at things like file permissions in Oracle Home. If there's something that we think is too open or that doesn't match what it should be, we'll tell you that. We don't go out and do, a full scan on Linux or AIX or something like that, but we'll at least check your Oracle Home for you. Oh, but you missed the most important part of DBSAT, Patrick. That's the cost. It is free. It's included with all your database licenses, so no additional charge. So Patrick asked about looking at the listener, does it tell you when you have unencrypted connections? And the answer to that is yes, it most certainly does. Here we go. Let me go back to sharing this report. If I can manage to spell encryption. So here it'll tell you, for example, that you are not encrypting your listener, which means that you're not doing SQLnet encryption. We do tend to focus more, Patrick, on native network encryption instead of SSL. Are you using SSL or TLS for your database? Okay. So for anyone who doesn't know, there's 2 ways to do network encryption for an Oracle database. One way is to do TLS encryption. We used to call it SSL. And to do this, you're going to issue a certificate to the database, and you're going to put that certificate in a wallet, and you're going to go out and configure the listener to use that wallet. You also have to go to every client and application and issue them the trusted certificate so that they'll accept the certificate the database is using and reconfigure them to use SSL or TLS. Almost nobody uses this. What most people do is native network encryption. And the way native network encryption works is you put in one additional parameter in your SQLnet.aura, and that one additional parameter tells the database to either require or request encryption. You get a choice. And Any connection that comes into the database, if you say request encryption, the database will ask that it be encrypted. As long as the client supports encryption, it automatically encrypts. If the client doesn't support encryption, then with requested, we'll fall back to unencrypted. With required, we'll actually refuse the connection. The great thing about native network encryption is it does not require changes at the client or at the application. It's a single setting on the server side.
You touched on wallets. Does a system have one wallet or multiple? One for like an end user, one for TDE, or is it all one wallet that can be used?
So most systems will have one wallet per database, and may have two wallets per database. So by default, we stick everything in a single wallet, and that would be encryption keys and certificates and all of that stuff. We do allow you to split out the encryption keys into a separate wallet. A lot of people want to treat those slightly differently. So if you look in your SQLnet.org, we support both wallet location and encryption wallet location. On a single server, you could have dozens of wallets because we use wallets for a lot of different things. The database uses them for encryption keys and certificates and stuff. We also use them for secure external password store. If you're running any of the Oracle middleware, wallets are often used for as a Java key store to host those certificates. So it's not really a firm answer, but usually one per database at a minimum.
Okay, that answers.
Patrick follows up with another question on DBSat. How can the client know that it's actually connected to the correct database server in native encryption? So what Patrick's asking about there for anyone who's monitoring chat is with TLS, you issue the database a server or a certificate, and the client has to trust that certificate. And so if someone tries to impersonate the database, then that certificate check would fail unless they had something that was issued by the same certificate user. With native network encryption, there is no certificate check. So Patrick, if a bad person has gotten on your network and has captured DNS, they could theoretically steer your users to a database of their own devising. So that is the downside of native network encryption, is there's no non-repudiation built in. I got to tell you though, banks, major credit card issuers, military, I mean, there's a lot of people using native encryption because their perception of that risk, the risk of somebody impersonating a database, is that it's a fairly low risk. But, and again, if you're monitoring chat, Patrick points out, well, if you're not mitigating the risk of somebody impersonating a database, then you've got the chance of someone doing a man-in-the-middle attack. You are, to a certain degree, correct in that, Patrick, but they have to be in the middle at the start of the communications, because during the initial communication, the encryption key that's chosen for native encryption is randomly generated using a Diffie-Hellman exchange. So if I was in the middle at the start of that Diffie-Hellman exchange, I might be able to intercept the key. But if I tried to insert myself in the middle after the connection was established, there would be no way to ever get the key, or at least no technically feasible way that I can think of. But if you're truly looking at security, no argument. TLS is more secure than native network encryption. It's just much harder to set up and much harder to maintain. And don't forget, with TLS, certificates expire. And we've had cases where someone goes in, puts in certificates for the database, and about 3 years later, all of a sudden, everything stops working, and they wonder why. Ooh, I am not sure what you mean by forward secrecy and native encryption. Okay, like if an adversary can log communication. Good question. So Patrick asks, we're talking about native network encryption where the key is randomly generated for each session. Patrick asked, does the key get changed during a session? And the answer to that is no. If you have a long-running connection, the same key will be used through the life of the connection, which means that if someone were able to break that encryption, they would be able to break the entire communication. In terms of encryption strength, the way Native works is if you don't tell it anything else, it'll choose the strongest mutually supported encryption algorithm. The first one it starts with is AES 256. If you're an 11G client and an 11G database or higher, you're going to start with AES 256. If you're back in 10G, we didn't have AES in 10G, so it would have been an RC4. But even RC4 is fairly cryptographically sound. So, never say never. Any encryption can eventually be broken, but you're breaking it for each session, and it's a random. It's theoretically possible, but it would be tough. Can I restrict the algorithms for native encryption, or would it be possible to have a downgrade to encryption method plain text? Ooh, this is a really good question. Hang on a second. Let me bring something up here real quick. I think you guys are still seeing my browser session.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go to books, and we're going to go to the net services reference. And we'll go to SQLnet.aura. All right, so within your SQLnet.aura, there's two parameters that really control this. One of them is this encryption server. This is normally the only one I set, and what I'll do is I'll either choose requested or required. I'll typically choose requested. The reason I choose requested is I normally want to allow specifically what you're saying there. I want it to allow to plain text. If for some reason I have a client that is so old or non-standard that it won't support encryption. If I go to required, then there is no plain text. I have to be encrypted. Now, once I go to encrypted, the next thing that takes over is what types of encryption do I support? This is the list of possible encryption types. What will usually happen is during the client-server negotiation, the client will attempt to make a connection. The database will either request or require encryption. The client will respond, I support encryption. The database will say, will you support AES 256? The client will respond either yes or no. And it'll work its way through the list of algorithms. This isn't in strength order, but it'll start from the most secure and work its way down to the least secure. If you want to, you can specify the types of encryption that you want. So if you only wanted AES 128 or only AES 256, you can specify that. I don't normally do that because by doing that, I run the risk of knocking out older clients that maybe don't have support for AES. And usually I'd rather, okay, I don't like RC4, but I'll support RC4 rather than have a connection fail. Now, what I can do is I can monitor $session connect info, the dynamic performance view $session connect info. There's a column in there called network service banner. And if I'm encrypted, network service banner will tell me what type of encryption was chosen. So if I see that everyone's doing AES 256 except for this one client, which is coming in, say at DES, which is horribly old and insecure, then I can go back and remediate just that one client, fix it, and have things, have it from now on use stronger in encryption. But again, Patrick, to answer your question, yes, you can restrict the algorithms for encryption. I normally don't do it because if I start refusing clients and applications start breaking, that's usually the end of my security project. Yes, that's it exactly. Comma-separated list of encryption types. Okay. Guys, we got about 5 minutes left. Any other questions? All right, well, hey, I want to thank everybody who took the time out of their day to join. This is the first one of these I've done. The plan is to try and do them each month. I'll maybe put a few more slides together for next month. You know, maybe pick a topic or something, but thank you all for giving me a part of your day and for using Oracle database. And let's keep it all secure.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. This was good.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.